Zombie Song. When I worked at a sub shop, my manager often let me pick the music during our shift. She said it was because I had great taste. I thought it was because she was flirting with me. We dated after I quit, but she enjoyed the same music as I did, so we were both right. Occasionally we would fuck around and put on the most obnoxious station we could find. We would take bets on how long it would take someone to notice and complain. We had a whiteboard in the prep area with a betting pool. The lesson from the game, other than the $20 you won if you were right, was that most people ignore the music, especially if the volume was low. Even though it was a corporate-approved set of stations, we had some exciting options like show tunes, Disney musicals, and Christmas songs. You would think people would notice if Christmas music played in February or October, but it would usually take hours for someone to notice. The same was true no matter where I was. I once sat for hours working in a cafe, listening to songs from animated movies. I had no idea until the person next to me had a meltdown about it. All it took was one person to mention it, and the songs would get stuck in my head. It got to the point where I would wear earbuds to listen to my music as I shopped or sat in cafes. This would save my life. I was in the grocery store when it started. I was picking up barbecue supplies on my way to a pool party with friends. My plan was to rush into the store, grab a dessert, some veggies with dip, something to grill, and a box of sodas. In and out. But I got delayed in the bakery section, torn between cupcakes and cookies that smelt freshly baked while listening to a true crime podcast. I finally picked Boston cream cupcakes, something I had no idea how to make myself. A crowd gathered around the registers. Everyone looked horrified and stepped back as 5 people lumbered into the crowd. I pulled out one earbud expecting to hear evacuation instructions. "We need 5 more volunteers," a monotonous voice said over the speakers. People took another step back, and I was pushed on 3 sides. I just wanted to make my purchase and leave, but someone grabbed my elbow and pulled me back. I turned to see an older woman with a gray pixie cut. "There's zombies," she said in a low whisper. "I saw it at another store. Don't go up there." Behind her were 3 men about my age. They beckoned me to follow. I did upon seeing one of the volunteers, a middle-aged woman, waddling the crowd, humming something. Her pupils obscured her irises. Another volunteer, an older man, put headphones over someone's ears and that person began to hum. "Don't listen." One of the guys leading us away from the crowd pointed to my earbuds. "This is round 3, and they all do that. Put your earbuds back in. Just stay still, don't make any movement." The woman flattened herself against the racks of potato chips. I put in my earbud, noticing the guys with me do the same. Employees from the back of the store, all with dilated pupils, waddled to the front. Other people walked down the aisle, curious about what was going on at the front of the store. None seemed to pay attention to us, other than quick, questioning glances. The zombified employees grabbed them and drafted them toward the registers. I wasn't sure why they ignored us, but I held my breath as they passed, hoping none of us would rattle a bag of chips. It seemed like we stood there for an eternity, the podcast in my earbuds telling me about a discovered, bloated body. Eventually, one of the men waved at us to follow him and led us to the store's back. I still had my basket of food as I picked up the pace. My heart pounding in my chest muted the details of the unsolved crime to nothing more than a hum. When I pushed through the loading area doors, I nearly ran into the man in front of me. He would have noticed me if I hadn't stumbled out of his path. Eyes dilated, lips pursed as if humming, he turned back through the doors and shuffled back in the direction we had come. I scrambled to catch up with the others I was escaping with, hoping they hadn't been turned as well. The older woman waving her arms, "Give location detail, where is she?" from the narrator. Once we made it to the storefront, we could see the zombies lumbering out of the store and into the main parking lot. Get in my car. I'll get us out of here. I gestured to my car, which was a few steps away. I'd parked in the side lot to avoid traffic. We all had baskets of food and tossed them into my trunk. As I pulled out of the lot, I could see the same thing happening in the surrounding plazas. Even the McDonald's and Wendy's down the street had people waddling out en masse. The older woman had sat next to me and was now playing with my radio. She would hear a note and quickly switch stations. "What the fuck is happening?" one of the men asked, panic making his voice waver. I looked at him in the rearview mirror. He was bald with a bushy blonde mustache. He looked to be in his mid-40s. The other man was black with a mini afros of black curls. "We need to get to our homes," the other man said. "We have to get away from the noise." The older woman turned off the radio. "I'm pretty sure it's everywhere now." She was petite with bright raspberry red hair, and I noticed hearing aids in her ears. "What's everywhere?" I tried to focus on the road, which was filling up with people. "The fucking song," she said. "I think it's a song that's doing this to people." "How do you know?" I glanced at her. "They put headphones on people, so it's some type of sound, and when we got back to the prep area, the music was louder than it was in the main store," she said. "I thought it was the first supermarket I went to, but when I came here, the same thing happened." She was panting, trying to catch her breath. "Let's try someone's house," I suggested. "Maybe it's safer at home." The younger man directed me to his apartment, which we agreed was the closest. We could see people waddling, black-eyed, from the apartment building when we pulled into the lot. "We probably have to get away from large groups of people," the other man suggested. We tried the woman's home, which was in a rural part of town. Her front door was wide open. "What if we go to a park or something?" she suggested, tears welled up in her eyes. I nodded and headed to a quiet park. "My name is Doug," the man with the blonde mustache said, his voice trembling. "What are your names?" "My name is Amy," I told them. We sat at a picnic table, eating the food we had stolen in our haste to get out. My cupcakes, veggies, and dip had been popular, but the sausages, since we had no way to cook them, remained in the car since we had no way to make a fire. We tried finding my car's lighter, but I never had one. Thanks to Doug we had chips and cold cuts, which made this feel like a meal. "I'm Nancy," the older woman said as she handed out napkins that had been in her basket. She also had a few bottles of water. "I'm Andre," the other man said. He was the only one who hadn't provided food, having had a shopping cart before our escape. "Okay, Nancy, you said this happened earlier too?" Doug said, taking over like most men do. "Who knows when this started," she said. "But yes, I saw it happen at another grocery store. Except they didn't bring people forward. People just changed in the middle of the store." "I bet," I said, "they were playing the music, but none of us pay attention, especially if it's not that loud." They looked confused, and I shared my theory about music. "The first store I went to wasn't very busy," Nancy said. "There was less noise to drown out the music." Andre nodded. "We were in a packed store because people were going to barbecues for the afternoon. I didn't even notice the music since my earbuds were in, but it would have been louder in the prep areas where the employees were working." "Right," I said, excited that the theory made sense. "I couldn't hear because I had earbuds in. Someone must have gotten desperate because people weren't changing. That could be why they demanded volunteers." "Do you think they were humming the music?" Nancy asked. They were all humming. All of us nodded and sat there in silence. "What do we do?" Andre eventually asked, taking a bite of a cupcake. Our phones all screamed with alerts as if someone had heard us. We all picked up our phones to read the message. Go to a shelter? Doug said, confused. Nancy shook her head. I don't think us being in one place is safe. I nodded. They could just play it and force us all to listen. They were playing it on every radio station when we were in the car, Nancy said, her voice rising in pitch. That's why I turned it off. I bet they played it over the television and internet. I'm shocked our phones haven't started playing automatically. Why do you think that? Doug asked, looking angry. Because people heard it in their homes, Nancy said, her eyes wide. I had 3 people at my house. They just left the door open. They would have closed it if everything was fine. I covered Nancy's trembling hand with mine, hoping to give her some comfort. We have to go somewhere, Andre said. We might have enough food for another meal, but we can't stay here. We need more food and a safe place to sleep. I knew he was right. We had to trust someone or abandon all hope of survival. I'm going to a shelter, Nancy said. I think we'll survive longer there. I nodded, agreeing with her. Andre looked back and forth at the 2 of us before sighing. Me, too. We turned to Doug, who seemed in deep concentration. What about you, Doug? Andre asked. Shh, he said, closing his eyes. I'm trying to think of what I heard. Maybe if we know the lyrics, we can avoid the song. We watched him for a few moments, but he started swaying on the bench before opening his eyes to reveal black, dilated pupils. The 3 of us got up and ran as his humming started. It can claim you just by remembering it. Andre yelled once we were in the car and I was driving away. We were all out of breath by the time we got in the car. We left the food, Nancy said. Now, we have no choice but to get to the shelter. They're not zombies, a teenage boy said every time someone said the word. We had been at the shelter for a day, as safe as we could be. When we had arrived yesterday, we had spread our theory, including that just thinking of the song could turn you. We had all powered off our cell phone, positive they would be the next source of the song. The Red Cross employees decided to play CDs on an ancient boombox to keep us safe. The shelter was in the high school cafeteria. As people came in, they turned in any food they brought with them. We, it turned out, still had some meat and chicken that we hadn't bothered to remove from the car. My sausages had been delicious. Just text people, someone new suggested when we talked about finding our loved ones. Everyone rolled their eyes and reminded them that our phones were going to be turned into weapons. Before we got out of the car the previous day, I'd sent texts to my sister, brother, and parents, letting them know where I was. If they were alive, then they hadn't gotten the messages. None had shown up at this shelter. I asked the Red Cross people to check other shelters. They gave me daily updates but nothing positive. What are they, if not zombies? Andre asked the kid, finally annoyed enough to ask. The 3 of us stuck together. Sometimes Andre and I would hold hands. Nancy would let me lean against her and put my head on her shoulder like my mother did. Zombies are dead, dude, the kid said, calming down. These people are, like, hypnotized. to waddle around and hum a song? I asked, trying to avoid thinking about the song and glad I hadn't heard much to put together. Yes, the kid said. The song has to be the message. Maybe the lyrics tell them what to do, and the music hypnotizes. Don't think about it, Nancy said, the dread making her sit up and grab the kid. Don't worry. He pushed her away. I didn't even hear it. Songs stick with us, I said, pulled Nancy back to the cot we were sitting on. That's why we learn better with songs. Plus, our minds gather far more information than we consciously know. It's better to think about your favorite song. Or Barry Manilow, Andre said with a laugh. That's one of the CDs we had found on a teacher's desk. How long will they be like this? Nancy asked, calming down again. She'd spent the previous night crying. She was sure her family was gone. We all shrugged. It would be a few more days before we knew. The days passed faster than I imagined. We found our way to the school library, and I spent my days reading everything I could find about hypnotism. Andre and I swapped books and shared theories that went nowhere. After a week, as the food supply got boring, we learned how long the zombies lasted. The ones we saw started moving slower, their waddling became lumbering. Then they started to collapse. The human body can only survive 4 days without water, Andre said. We sat at a window, watching the activity. The school had been designed to be a shelter. The windows and walls were thick to withstand storms. It made it impossible to hear the zombies humming. It's been 7 days. This means people kept hearing the song for more days, I said, trying to do the simple math. I bet it's people remembering the song, Andre whispered. I wonder if other shelters have realized it can do damage. We heard a scream and ran back to the cafeteria. Nancy came running out and grabbed our hands. It's back. Run. She yelled. We followed her into one of the classrooms, shut the door, and hid under the teacher's desk, away from the door. What happened? I whispered. Someone new came in. He said he was done trying to survive on his own, she said, catching her breath. He brought a body with him so they could dissect it in a lab. They die, we've been watching it, Andre said. Nancy shook her head, her eyes wide. The kid wasn't wrong about them being zombies, but they turn into one when they die. They keep humming after death. I was taken aback. How couldn't that man hear it? I asked. He was a senior citizen, she whispered. I could see his cheap hearing aids. I'm willing to bet he couldn't hear it. Those things never work. Andre and I stared at her. We're going to die, I said to them. Nancy shook her head. Not me. I watched her pull 2 small hearing aids out of her ears. Andre scrambled over to the teacher's desk and pulled a pencil out of the desk just as the handle on the classroom door jiggled, and the door shook in the frame. Don't. I said when he scurried back over. There are other solutions. Andre shook his head. No, Amy, there's no other option. I've been thinking about it. If it gets in our heads, we're done. We can find toilet paper and duct tape, I said in a loud whisper. What do we risk trying to find those things? This is the only way we'll survive, he said. You shove this in my ear, and I'll do yours. I put my hands up to stop him. No. This will end, and you'll regret this. You have no idea what you're doing. Doing this could lead to your death. What's the point if you could die anyway? Nancy couldn't hear any of this, and I wished she could so she could support me. Instead, she got up and walked out of the room, confident in her safety. She swung the door wide and I could see one of the zombies in the hall, but I couldn't hear the humming yet. Andre took a deep breath and put the pencil up to his ear. "No, Amy," he said, pity in his eyes. "There's no end that includes hearing. If they keep humming the song even after they die, then no place is safe." I pursed my lips and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to watch him do this. I was willing to take my chances. "No. I can't," I whispered and shuddered. "I'm going to find another solution. Anything would be better than what you're going to do." I scrambled toward the door. As I ran out, without turning back, and put my hands over my ears. I didn't want to know if Andre did what I feared. I saw the zombies and they saw me, but I kept running. I went into one of the bathrooms, hoping to find something that would block out the sound or hide while I came up with a plan. I needed something stronger than toilet paper to block out the sound of the humming. I quickly searched the bathroom for pads or tampons, but there were none on the machine. I was sure there were some with the Red Cross supplies, if I could get there. Plus, I still had my earbuds and I was willing to bet there were noise-canceling headphones for children with sensory sensitivity. I only needed something temporary. Ideas raced through my mind until I heard the door open. Someone hummed as they shuffled in and I ran out of time.